we talked about mindfulness last week as being a part of, a type of meditation practice. Basically, we're using a meditation object. I recommend the breath in most cases. We focus on the breath, and then our attention wanders off, and then we take a look at that in a very mindful way, without judgment, without commentary, without decision, and we see it. These things, in whether it has something to do with the body, or maybe it's a feeling or a state, a mood or emotion that comes up. Basically, we focus on the breath, and we realize that our attention has wandered off, and it's usually in the past or in the future. Almost 100% of the time, it's in the past and the future. And when we realize that, we can take a look at what kind of, why did my mind have an inclination to go to the past, or why is it going to the future? And then we can kind of look at it in terms of how that affects the body, feelings and the emotions that we have. These are the mind objects too. These insights that come up for us. So in other words, these are the 4 areas of mindfulness that we talked about last week: body, feelings, mind, and then mind objects or dharmas. And we can, sit and do that practice. But I still like to say that the benefit or the mindfulness is like the result of a good meditation practice. It's actually the byproduct of a good meditation practice, is mindfulness itself. So we don't have to be practicing mindfulness when we're meditating. We can be mindful all the time. And one of the things about that is being very, very present. Coming into and asking ourselves, am I present? Am I in this presence? Or is my mind in the past and the future? And recognizing that. That's really one of the keys to mindfulness, is being present. Then we're really in life. We know that this presence is that only time factor that we actually only have. And so that's the only place that we can really be mindful, is in that presence. We can be mindful when we're thinking about the past and thinking about the future, right? The reason I say right is because it's worth looking at this, because we can be in this present moment. We are sitting here in this present moment, and we're mindfully thinking about something from the past. But as long as we're drawn into that, and we forget that we're in this presence, actually we feel that we're in the past or in the future, then it's not mindfulness anymore. It's that fine line. That presence is so important.
So in other words, you're saying that it's okay to contemplate a past situation or a future situation with the intention of truly just contemplating, rather than
in this present, feeling that we're in this present moment, because this is the only moment we have. And we recall a health issue that we had in the past, and how it is affecting us now. That health issue. Let's say I had a knee injury, years ago, and I did some physical therapy, but it's affecting my knee in the present moment, right now. So I'm mindfully thinking about that procedure, that I had surgery, and then I had physical therapy, and now my knee is fine. So I'm being very mindful about it. I'm not being judgmental, about the whole thing. I'm just looking at it from this standpoint. And yeah, basically that's it. And when we're not mindful, we are just thrust into the past or the future, and we actually are living that. We believe that that is our life. That is actually what is happening at the moment, rather than just the presence.
you get lost in it and then it dredges up emotions. It's the idea of not getting lost in it.
Yeah,
It's
like a
the-
fear, desire. It's like saying, well, God, if I only got that job 5 years ago,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
It's the story.
Not that, yeah.
Yeah, getting drawn into our own story, or creating our. It's usually the past, that's where the damaging thing is, and if it's the future, there's some fear involved, and we can mindfully look at the fear. We can actually look at why we're afraid of something that might be coming up in the future. We can, when we do it, the fear almost is not there anymore because we're looking at it from this presence. Yeah, that's actually a pretty good example. If we're doing something, let's say we're doing something in the moment, and we can bring all of our attention into doing that, like doing the dishes, and that is mindfulness. Imagine that you're doing that, and your intention though is to think about something that you're going to be doing in the future, in the near future. Like, I'm doing the dishes right now, and you're in the presence, 100%. But with the intention for just for a moment, you put your intention on making a plan that, like in an hour, what you're going to have to be doing.
And that's okay?
Yes, as long as we know that you're doing it. Yeah.
Okay.
As long as the intention is there. Yeah, that's why I wanted to clear this up first before we get into the concentration thing, and it's just basically what mindfulness is, and how to look at it. The one thing that we shouldn't, whenever we put words into any of this, it's complicated. It sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's not at all like that when we're actually meditating. We're not going through all those steps, like labeling and thinking about, am I in the past or the future? Am I in the present moment? And what should I, not be thinking about? And what should I be thinking about? It's not really like that when we're meditating. Basically, we use the breath to bring us into this presence. Use the breath as a tool. So as long as we're focusing on the breath, we're there. And then something pulls our attention away, and it usually goes to the past or the future, right? And at that moment, we briefly analyze it, investigate it, and then come back to the breath. And that's really the practice. That's really the Vipassana practice. And then the Buddha was kind enough to break this mindfulness practice into the four categories of the body, feelings, mind states, and mind objects. Because it's one of those areas, that is one of those things that is happening, within the thought process. We usually just think of it as thoughts, but the Buddha, he broke it down into other areas, thoughts of the body, basically thoughts of these feelings. I like this, I don't like that, But basically, if we just look at it as thoughts, we'll see that it's in the past or it's in the future. And sometimes that's enough. And we notice that, then we come back to the breath. And again, the breath is just a tool for us to come into this presence. Because when we come into this presence, we're discovering our true nature, who we really are. The main thing about the hindrances, we'll talk quite a bit about them here in a moment, but it's like when they're not there, that's basically it. When they're gone, that's when we are concentrated. And we all get a taste of that all the time, but usually there's just not that much control over it. So if we use a target, let's just imagine there's a target, the same kind of target that we use in sports, like throw a dart at. And if somebody said, here's your darts, here's a nice dart, and I'm going to throw the dart at the target. So that's that type of momentary concentration is the kind of concentration that we experience most of the time, where we are aware of the target, and we're aware of the person handing us the dart, and we're aware of that whole thing, That's momentary concentration. And that's where we're at right now. I'm using momentary concentration. I'm doing this, doing that, I'm trying to explain things, and that's where we are most of the time. But we do go into these deep states of concentration where the hindrances are absolutely gone. We do it a lot, but we have no control over it. Now, when we go into access concentration, it's like we're starting to figure out that target. we go, oh, now, okay, I throw this dart, and I'm trying to hit the bullseye, the center of the target. And when we're looking at it that kind of way, everything else disappears. Like, okay, take this dart and put it in that bullseye. There's that access concentration. It's called access concentration because it's a way of getting into the single-pointed concentration, this jhana that we'll be talking about here. And that access concentration is actually where, when people feel really good about their meditation, that's usually where they're at. It's access. And if I had everybody close their eyes and we start meditating and you bring your attention to your breath and you're right there, that would be access concentration. If your attention stayed there, you would go in, you start going into jhana.
Just one really quick question. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting it, like you have to concentrate on that point of the nose, or you need to feel that breath.
Whatever works for you, basically. If everybody used their breath for meditation, and then we went around and asked them exactly what they were doing, it would be slightly different for everyone. Usually it's the sensation, of the air, just wherever we feel it the most.
I tried it,
Mhm.
but I never felt, never felt it, so I just tried to focus somewhere here or here.
Yeah, wherever it works. Yeah. Some people feel it right here. Basically, usually anywhere between the tip of the nose and the upper lip for a lot of people. Some people feel it in the movement of the lungs, in the throat. Some people even the abdomen. So the breath is, again, we're using that as a tool to bring our concentration to a single point. We could use anything, for a meditation object. The breath is by far the best because it's so convenient. It's there all the time. When we focus on it, we can know that we're focused. When we're not focusing on it, it still works for us, thankfully. We could use the beating of the heart. We could use a mantra. We could use anything. I suggest the breath. That's what the Buddha always encouraged people to use. But we're using it as a tool something to focus on. Our mind wanders away and we can bring it back to the breath. Now, the difference between mindfulness meditation, we're sitting with the intention of watching everything that arises to our consciousness, and then we use the breath to kind of come back home, right, with mindfulness. But with concentration, it seems like the same practice, but our intention is to not see what's arising for us, just to come back to the breath and stay there. So it's a little bit different. We're still using the same tool. We're still using the breath, but the intention is different, to come back to that breath, and hopefully the mind will fatigue of that, pulling it back, and pretty soon you'll be able to stay right there. And that's single-pointed concentration. It feels like we can rest with the breath. It's called absorption because we feel that our meditation object, this is the representation of our meditation object and ourselves are absorbed, that there's no duality between the two. It's the same thing. You could say that the meditation object is absorbed in us, or that we are absorbed into that meditation object, but it doesn't matter. It's just one. So we have momentary concentration. It can be very broad, that's where we spend most of our time. It's kind of like multitasking, which isn't necessarily multitasking is something that we don't really do. We just move our attention from one thing to the next to the next. If it feels like we're multitasking, or if we think we're multitasking, that's just because we're momentarily going, here to here to whatever we're doing. And so I'm talking about concentration from the aspect of our life, like our doing, but I'm also talking about concentration from the standpoint of focusing on a single object. We can look at it in two different ways. Concentrating on a task, anybody that's ever done anything really worthwhile, and people that can call themselves successful in life have done it because of concentration. Concentration is such a thing that we all have it, and it's nothing that we can really work at. The only thing that we can work at is the distractions, and understand the distractions, which are the hindrances. If none of us had any distractions, we could place our concentration on anything, right? It would all be the same. We would draw all of our attention to one area, and it would just stay right there. And that's what jhana really is. It's getting an upper hand on these distractions. I'm going to start using the word jhana, to describe this absorption or this single-pointed type of concentration. Jhana is a Pali word that, and sometimes when you look it up, it just means concentration, but it's a type of concentration that is single-pointed with an intention. And there's different layers, different levels of jhana that we can go into. Again, I just want to remind you that access concentration is where we usually meditate. And once we understand access concentration, we go into this. Sometimes we don't even understand jhana. It just happens. It feels like you fall into this area of concentration because it feels so different, because all of the hindrances are gone. There's no hindrances at all. There's no desire or aversion. We talked about the hindrances before, but desire, aversion, restlessness and worry, sloth and torpor and doubt, those hindrances are not there. There's 5 hindrances, right? And there's also 5 jhana factors. And don't let this get too confusing. Well, that's my job, right? Not allowing it to get too confusing. But so I just want to be very careful when I explain this. There are 5 hindrances, but there's 5 jhana factors. And the first jhana has all of these factors. It's actually the jhana factors that eliminate the hindrances. And so when the jhana factors are what are called applied thought, or applied thinking, we could say, and the sustained thought, and then there's a joy, blissfulness, and then single-pointed concentration. And when those are present, they eliminate the hindrances. The hindrances just don't stand a chance with those. The applied thought is the kind of thinking, and we've all experienced this, the kind of thinking that feels like it's in the background and doesn't have any bearing. It doesn't bother us at all. Just really, really subtle little thoughts, that are, and the reason they're there is because we're human, basically. They've been there for so long, and we've had all of these thoughts going on in our mind for so many years that they just linger. And it's just like a computer that is just running all the time, and we just can't stop it. But they're so far in the background that we're not even paying any attention to them. that's applied thought. And then sustained thought is very similar, but it's our ability to, if we wanted to, we could put that, it's kind of like putting your thinking cap on. We could put a thought towards an object, and it would stay right there. It's like having the thought of sometimes in jhana the thought love will come up, the word love and what it means, and we can place that thought on something and it'll stay right there. There's nothing to pull it away. There's no hindrances that could pull it away. I mean, this sounds very technical. Now, all of this happens really fast and it's really subtle, but in essence, I want to explain it because this is actually what happens. And so the first jhana has these different kinds of thought in it. It also has joy and blissfulness and single-pointed concentration. All of these factors are in the first jhana. But it feels so different than our normal way of being because those hindrances are gone. And so we're just happy, blissful, serene. I could throw all these fancy words out there, but that's the first jhana. And again, we experience this probably on a daily basis, but we have no control over it. We're just there, and then we're back into the world again. If you know what I mean. There's moments where we are very, very happy and very blissful, right? Sometimes for no reason. And it's almost like we don't trust it, so we have to, we bounce out of it again. But in jhana, usually the very first jhana is like such a surprise. Oh, I got to go tell my teacher about this one, and that's usually where I hear the reports, from people. And the key is to be able to remember how it happened, how we got into that jhana. And this is the type of practice that the Buddha got very, very good at. Now the second jhana, you would think, well, what's wrong with all this blissfulness? Why would I want to go deeper? But the mind has an inclination to go even deeper than that. And it goes into second jhana, and in second jhana there's no thought. Not even those background thoughts aren't even there. It's as if there's a forest pond and there's a little breeze. That would be the thought, and then the breeze stops, and it's just like this floor, And so that's the primary substance of that, I could say, is joy and blissfulness. Usually, in second jhana, a person really doesn't recognize it while they're in there, except for after they come out. They can kind of review, that state that they were in. And in second jhana, you can say you have complete control over time. You can say, well, I'm going to sit in jhana for an hour and 32 minutes. And without a clock or a timer or anything, you'll come out in exactly an hour and 32 minutes later, just by setting that intention. So the primary thing is that joy, and it's an energetic kind of joy. It's like, wow, this is really good stuff, That thinking process isn't there. I'm just kind of using this as an example. Energetic joy. And that energetic joy is actually too much to sustain for a long period. So that energetic joy leaves. This is just like any other meditation where we're reducing, we're not adding anything. So actually, that energetic joy is gone. It leaves, and so there's really a profound stillness. That's the blissfulness. blissfulness, and single-pointed concentration. Those are the only factors that are left there. That's third jhana, blissfulness, single-pointed concentration. And then in fourth jhana, even the blissfulness is not even needed. It's gone. Oftentimes, a person has to meditate and practice a lot before they can get into these different jhanas like this. Often, some people never get past first jhana, actually. But you can get kind of hooked on a jhana, kind of stay there, kind of in a selfish way, But so a person doesn't always go deeper. Fourth jhana is single-pointedness, and there's an added ingredient. It's not really added, but it's mentioned because it's so important, and that is equanimity. Single-pointedness and equanimity. So everything is so, I guess you could say, so perfect, and just the way it's supposed to be. There's no. It's not that we're trying to decide, or that we don't accept right or wrong or good or bad or pretty and ugly. These dualities. It's just that they're not needed. There's nothing substantial in that duality itself. And so that's the equanimity that's a part of fourth jhana.